Good morning. It is Monday, July 20th, and welcome to another podcast of Thinking is Contagious. Um, we hope that you find these broadcasts thought provoking and either pro or con. Love to hear your input, love to hear your feedback. And I would ask uh, that if you enjoy what we're doing, that you subscribe. It's important. We would like to bring forth this platform and try to reach as many people with it as we possibly can. And the common cause is to get people thinking and hopefully to get people thinking together in unity and moving this country forward in the right direction. Wanted to talk a little bit about the United States Postal Service. There's a bill which has been brought forth to provide $25 billion worth of funding. It's actually a Republican bill by Susan Collins from Maine, but it is endorsed by both sides of the aisle, including Chuck Schumer. And they're asking for $25 billion to bail out the Postal Service. Postal Service has been bleeding red ink for probably a couple of decades now. In the last 10 years, they've lost about $66 billion. They're asking for $25 billion based on COVID damages, which is totally absurd. The post office has been bleeding red ink, like I said, way before COVID. Certainly COVID has exacerbated it, made it more difficult, but its competitors are thriving during this COVID pandemic with people making deliveries and ordering over the internet. So it boils down to a couple of reasons why the post office is bleeding red ink. The first and foremost is it's a broken model. It's a broken business model. They are not competitive with private sector. Nothing the government does is competitive with private sector. Everything the government does is much more expensive than with the private sector. And it boils down to the guy who writes the check, the person that signs the check. There's no accountability. It's not their money. The easiest money to spend is someone else's money. So while the Postal Service is not funded by taxpayer dollars, they're supposed to be independent. They're supposed to be self-supporting. The model does not work. And the model does not work for various reasons. Aside from the delivery of the United States mail, the Postal Service also has quite a few, and I'm going to get the numbers here exactly. The Postal Service has 31,000 post offices and 31,000 post offices and 4,000 contractor-run mail shops, each with their own independent overhead cost. These shops are union-run shops, and those union-run shops impose on the post office political pressures that affect everything from delivery frequency. It's mandated there be 6 days per week. The precludes them from being able to shutter money-losing post offices. By law, the vast majority of all UPS positions are held by unionized federal employees. That's a problem, which have robust job protections. The USPS ill-fated effort to install postal counters at Staples is an example of this. It shows how costly these union protections really are and how impactful they are to the bottom line, because this option, this consumer-friendly option, being able to implement in the Staples stores, these outlets, was struck down by the National Labor Relations Board because they said allowing Staples employees to sell postage and receive payment for parcels, for shipments, for that, violated the union contract with postal employees. So um, that is a huge component, the union component. Another huge component is the pensions. And this is legislation that was passed by Republican-led Congress, which is in 2006, which basically required the post office to fund their pensions 75 years in advance. That is a huge burden, especially when you consider there's 500,000 postal employees currently, and there's 600,000 retired employees receiving pensions from the Postal Service. It's a broken business model. Instead of addressing the business model, instead of addressing the fact that it doesn't compete with private sector, instead of going after the obvious, the union component of it, what our politicians have done in their self-ingratiating and best interest, in their best interest, is address how to shift the burden, kick the can down the road, so to speak. Our versions of Hugo Chavez and Fidel Castro, Cortez Ocasio and Bernie Sanders, their brilliant idea of the United States Postal Service is that since they can't compete in the parcel service industry, they have a proposal going where they would also allow the Postal Service to provide checking and savings accounts to American citizens. So the Postal Service can't compete delivering packages with private sector. So let's see if they can compete with the private sector banking industry. And while I did say that Postal Service cannot rely on taxpayer funding, with this $25 billion bailout, it is taxpayer dollars. So it's a failed system. It's an unnecessary system, business. It's not. There's no need for it. Private sector is filling the void more efficiently, more cost effectively, more transparently. And it's obvious because the consumer dictates what works, supply and demand. And what they're demanding is what the private delivery services provide. The rest of this is just appeasement of the unions by the politicians who look for union endorsements, who indirectly benefit from union contracts. And that's a whole nother topic, but glad to get into it anytime you'd like. We are looking at a proposal to send $25 billion, to throw $25 billion in a black hole. The United States Postal Service cannot compete, will not make money, will not be a good bank. The federal government has to realize they can't make this work. They don't have the expertise and they don't have the capacity to do so. And they should stay out of private sector, especially sectors of the private sector that are working just fine, and companies are making billions of dollars a year doing what the Postal Service can't get done on a most basic, and with starting from a monopoly point of view many decades ago. So I think that that's something that we need to address. You need to let your lawmakers know that no interest in bailing out a failing industry, an industry that's proven that they can't compete. That's my thoughts on the Postal Service.